Welcome. This is Eitan Shalom at the Body Mind Wellness Center in San Diego with a continuation of the lesson about washing and rinsing and preparing lentils for making lentil soup. And these are the lentils, the Middle Eastern pink lentils that are very popular in Turkish and Lebanese cuisine for making adz, which is the Arabic name for lentil, sharbat adz, lentil soup. I may not be pronouncing that exactly correctly. Sharbat adz. Sharbat is soup, adz is lentils. And so now you'll see these beautiful pink lentils that I've washed and soaked. The color, when you buy these in the store, they're almost red. And now they're a beautiful yellow color and very clean. The residue of I've soaked them, I've washed them as I did in the previous video, and then after washing them really well, 5 or 6 times, I've soaked them. These were actually soaked overnight in the refrigerator because I didn't have time to cook them yesterday. And you'll see that water's quite clear. And I'm going to be making a Middle Eastern lentil soup that is actually my original version of a lentil soup that draws on the most simple version of lentil soup, which is the style of lentil soup cooked in Lebanon, where it's simply lentils, onion, tomato, and parsley, maybe with carrot in it. And it's actually rather a bit bland. And then they salt and pepper, and then they add lemon at the table. They will also sometimes put spinach in that. That's a very mild lentil soup. I tend to like spices a bit more. So I'm going to use some of the spicing arrangements that are used in the lentil soup that are made by the Gulf Arabs, the Arabs who live in Oman and Bahrain, on the east side there, Basra in southern Iraq, Saudi, even Yemen, in which they use garlic as well as onion. And they also use a wonderful spice mixture that's called baharat. And it's interesting because baharat is the name for India in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, India is called, and also Hindi, it's called baharat. And this mixture of spices, which are spices that come from India originally, is called in the Arab world baharat. And it's something a little bit similar to garam masala in Indian spicing. And you can buy baharat online. It's Bharat. Probably, I don't know if you can read the ingredients. This is a baharat that I bought at the Iranian market from the Iranian company called Sadaf. And this baharat contains cinnamon, cardamom, cumin, ginger, and cloves. So that's an ingredient that I'm going to use in my soup. Sometimes I'll even put a little bit of fresh ginger. I'm influenced by my Indian cooking, and in Indian cooking you often put fresh ginger in lentils, but when I'm making a Middle Eastern soup, I generally don't. The fresh ginger taste is going to be too strong, and the amount of ginger in the baharat mixed with the cumin, cloves, cardamom, and cinnamon is just right. I'm also going to use bay leaf. These are 3 bay leaves, but these are Indian bay leaves. I prefer Indian bay leaf. Indian bay leaf tends to be a little bit more fragrant and floral smelling than the ordinary bay leaf. But ordinary bay leaf is fine, and you can use bay leaf or not. I'm not aware of it being used in the Middle Eastern cooking for the lentil soup, although it would stand to reason that Lebanon, which is a country famous for laurel, would be using it. Of course, I'm also going to use salt and pepper. That's 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. I'm very fond of the black pepper which comes from L.Ac. There's 2 kinds of black pepper. One is called Malabar, that's the common one, and there's another kind called L.Ac. And you can buy that online, and I grind it fresh in a small spice grinder. So for this amount of lentils, which I did not measure my lentils, but I'm going to guess that that's about 2 cups of lentils, maybe 2.5 cups. Yeah, maybe 2.5 cups. So I'm going to be using 1 teaspoon of salt and pepper. I'm going to be using a teaspoon, less than a teaspoon of allspice. I'm going to be using a teaspoon of cumin. I'm going to be using a dash of the bharat powder. I'm going to be using about 2/3 of a cup of chopped carrot. I'm going to be using 1/2 cup of diced parsley. A bit lazy today. I could have diced that. If I were a professional cook, I would have diced that parsley really finely. And then I'm going to be using 3 cloves of garlic that I've sliced. And I'm going to be using, let's see, how much is this? I'm going to be using nearly 2 cups of chopped white onion. I tend to be, well, I'm going to actually not use all of that. I'm going to use about 1.5 cups of chopped white onion. White onion is fine in this. Normally or usually I prefer red onion. I just like the flavor. It's a little bit sharper, but white onion is fine. Brown onion is excellent. For these kind of lentils, I tend to use brown onion with brown lentils and red onion with these pink lentils. And so the first thing I'm going to do is and by the way, one last thing is that the Lebanese soup tends to be purely vegetarian. Sometimes they'll make the Lebanese style soup with chicken broth. And then in the Gulf states and North Africa, they're very fond, from Egypt all the way to Morocco, they're very fond of using a bone broth. So this is for the lentil soup as the base. So this is an excellent lentil soup if you're not a vegetarian, for incorporating bone broth into your diet. And one more thing. In most of the, all of the lentil soups of the Middle East, they're always going to have a sour flavor added, and that's true of India as well. The sour flavor, whether you get it from tamarind or tomato or lemon or something called pomegranate molasses, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, the sour flavor is a digestive. Lentils are fundamentally bland. They're really fundamentally without a lot of flavor. They have some flavor, but nobody in the world, unless you're really stuck, will just boil lentils and have unsalted lentils as a soup. We add flavorings because the flavorings help us to digest. And also the sour flavor as well. And we know this from science, the sour flavor will actually make the minerals in things more absorbable. So if you, for example, are cooking the vegetable kale, which is very high in calcium, if you add some lemon or vinegar into the kale when you're cooking, then the calcium in the kale is made to be much more absorbable, so you get more nutrition. So there's a lot of wisdom to the methods of cooking that comes from tradition. For this dish, because I'm using baharat, I find that when I use the baharat, that my preference, I could use lemon,